All right, I'll jump in, and this will actually be symbolic of the onboarding process that we did. So, yeah, to give the brief recap, calls, 9 through, I don't know if you call it 15 or so. So that's 5 or 6 weeks, or not weeks, 5 or 6 calls. But I showed up shortly after the last call, and the onboarding that I was referring to in call 10 was that, yeah, we did reverse onboarding, and I tried to teach you all everything that I already knew about the group, its aims, how it was functioning, and what we were trying to do. And that seemed to be that seemed to work pretty well as far as then, providing a feedback loop and then us coming together. I do remember I remarked it felt a bit like easy mode in that we have pre-existing relationships. I knew all of you. It didn't seem like a zero to high trust, but rather an existing high trust to, you know, even higher trust and in a slightly different context. But that continued into the next call, which I think we called at the time like reaching a plateau. That felt less like onboarding and more like finding a new synthesis or a new integration or of a new, kind of point of what is this now with an extra member, or what is this now at this time, given the learning and the history of learning and the integration of all of that, which led in calls 12, 13, 14 into really the substantive, I think, chunk in this whole time span of us looking at money, we and each other, and all sorts of relationships around that. The components of that, I like that we really did open up and go deep. I shared things personally about my finances and situation that haven't I haven't really done in any other container. And we heard from other folks as well, kind of all of us, really opening up about what are the realities of our resource and financial situation, the piles as well as the flows, and just how everything moves and moves around. Then going into the case studies, where first between Narayan and Teresa and Benjamin, and that flow of money, and really, holistically looking at it from the outside, and how did Narayan feel at various points along the way? How did Benjamin and Teresa feel? What did it mean on either side? And how did that meaning weave in with other flows of money from other supporters or other people? And that was really interesting, and set us up for then the following session, where then it was my turn across with Benjamin and Teresa there. And I shared about my financial details, and we talked about, a larger financial flow of a different scope and magnitude there, and how to, yeah, I remember the saying, let's not do the just a one-off transfer. That feels too easy in a way. I remember that being a significant point of like, okay, yeah, yeah, we want to figure this out in a different way. How do we make this a flow? How do we make it a relationship? How does it, how does it subsist over time? And what does it mean over time? And how does that relate to our container and our relationships? So we yeah, finished off in 14 with Carol sharing, kind of completing the financial background, kind of background information sharing, and then from there into, well, we hit the holidays as well, and so things felt a little different over the holidays, but talking about all of the potential and the possibilities, and it almost feels like a little bit of a phase shift for me of like, oh, okay, now we've really, talk about plateau and but okay, we've really built up these bases and these processes and the trust and the fluidity and the ability, the capacity, built up the capacity, and now, all right, yeah, now what are we doing with that? And that there are so many things already going, projects that involve some or all of us, and just across the network and extending outside of the network, that, where does the village start and end, is a really interesting point of discussion there. But I'll wrap it up, and Yeah, okay. There's my summary, and everybody else can jump in now too.
I'd love to share that. Yeah, I feel energized just hearing you recap the last phase shift energy, because we had been asking for many weeks, what kind of experiments do we want to run? And I feel like as that kind of shifted, we were feeling into, well, what are we already doing? What's already happening? What are we like intrinsically drawn to being creating in the world? And then from there, we can re-ask the question, what kind of experiments do we want to run with the funds that we've received, and where might that flow to lubricate the process that the village is already going through?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I also feel really alive to a lot of questions that we were asking throughout the calls from call 9 until this call is call 16, I think, or call 17, about just like, how do we onboard and off-ramp people that might want to experiment in the village? How do we grow community? How might we design principles of relating? How might we create it safe for people to reveal intimate context about their lives? And how might we create communication pathways to enable people to feel comfortable sharing what they need? And all of these kinds of questions around what actually is required for a village to operate and run. And we spend a lot of time just thinking and talking about what we think that could look like. And I think that's really essential for laying a ground that we're building on as well.
I can jump in. One thing that was very attractive to me that feels maybe a bit something that's a bit special or unique here is in the last few weeks, while we were doing kind of sharing of our background context with one another, we were able to have the insight that not only is there value in like the concrete information that gets shared, but there's actually the opportunity for other resources to be generated through that activity. So there was actually a way in which, because we framed it very much as a learning process, we were able to feel more deeply connected, or to feel more intimacy with one another at the end of it, because we went in and with a kind of self-authored appetite on each member's part for, leaning into a little bit of vulnerability, let's say, or an edge of what I might not share in other contexts, not beyond what felt safe, but at the edge that felt appropriate given what we were sensing in ourselves and with the group. And so it was actually really interesting the way that those sessions of sharing about our background context led to a deepening of trust amongst us, that at least in terms of each of our subjectively reporting, it seems to be kind of consistent amongst us. And so that actually is it will be of material value to us as we step into concrete experiments. One other thing that I'll note is a bit earlier on the session where we had written, I felt like we reached a new plateau or synthesis today. That call was part of actually developing a document that is called something like Village Design Principles. And one of the things outlined, well, maybe two interesting things in that document that are interesting to note here. One is we talked about how, rather than viewing our village solely as like a kind of mutual aid network that flows resources, like flowing financial resources from A to B, we're actually viewing this village as inherently creative or generative. So we're actually even more interested in the generation and co-generation of value through collaboration than we are simply flowing 10 units of value from A to B, although the flow of resources, material resources, financial resources, and other would be part of the support structure underlying that co-creation. And so that's part of what's leading to this hypothesis that perhaps some of the experiments that we end up running, where we're going to start allocating some of the resources that we have through the grant, are actually going to be in relation to like what are the most exciting opportunities for creation that are already happening in our lives, or that can happen amongst us. and when might, a small amount, 10 units of financial capital actually be able to support 50 units of other kinds of capital for being generated, including the trust and the learning inherent in our relationships. And then just one other thing that seemed relevant from the design principles document is it seemed like all of us have a lot of interest in a kind of mutual aid network where people are kind of leaning into experiencing themselves both as an individual human and as part of something bigger than themselves. And that there's actually something in that perspectival shift and all the nuanced learning of what does it actually mean to live and operate non-naively as both an individual and as part of something deeply connected with others. Something about that learning seems to feel both very pragmatic and also sacred to us, and something that we're interested in kind of building. That seems to be some kind of a North Star that we're wanting to allow the village to kind of develop or evolve towards.
Jumping off of that one, around the time that we developed the design principles, I was doing the experiment in Puerto Rico. And so I actually digested that design principle with the team that I was working with that crew, while I was there. And so that started to spark all of these other conversations that I was having in a different membrane, in a different country. Some of those people are now going to be coming to the collaborative strategy session tomorrow. And so the thinking that this membrane has started to do has affected other membranes. And it's not just that it's dispersing outwards, but it's actually looping back in. And I imagine that in certain ways, it's going to facilitate other conversations. And I know some other people here have actually also connected with the other people that I was on in that experiment with. So there's something around how the learning that's happening with the type of focus and I guess like the seriousness that we're holding for the stewardship of the $4,500, but also the just the intent and purpose of this particular group is rippling outwards already.
Yeah, one, I'll just add kind of like one shift for me from our last time reflecting and recording a video. That was our first reflection video. This is our second reflection video. And there is a shift for me. It became really clear that we're not just building a village in addition, like trying to build a village, whether it's virtual or physical, in addition to our lives and, what the world that, the local kind of context we're in. I think in this stage, what I realize, or what I think we all realize, is that instead of building a village in addition to what we're already doing, why don't we actually try to connect our local contexts and our current ongoing adventures? And how do we actually use the village as a layer to support, to connect the communities that we're already in, the projects that we're already doing, and how to use the village, this working crew, as a way to build those channels to share learning and then share value and co-generate value. So that's why we started really going into each of our background, is to map out, okay, Carol is not just a working member in this working crew. Carol is also tied to these are the communities, and Carol is also tied to these other ways of generating value already. And so then how can we, integrate that better across communities and across, across organizations that we are all embedded in. So then in some ways, this village thing is not extra work. It is not extra work in addition to other things, but it's work that deepening our existing relationships and existing value flows, and that just feels so much in some ways easier because that means we're already in this village. That means we don't have to invent something out of nothing. So it feels easier, and also it feels much more expansive, so that this village is not just about, oh, we're just gonna, have some best practices of experimenting how to give each other, $35 a month. I mean, of course we can do that, but I think now in this stage, we're like, whoa, there is so much more opportunities for us to integrate the value flows and generate the value flows in really creative ways. And then those best practices of giving each other money and trying, those just becomes some experiments we could choose to do. And then still we can have this bigger kind of vision and deeper integration. So that was really, really exciting for me. And to just realize we're already in this village. A lot of things have already been created. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's really alive to me hearing that is that in the set of calls that we've had since the last reflection video, we also talked about, there was a crash of like FTX crashed, and there was this sense of like, almost like the sense of like, what's reliable in terms of money, and that question bringing up this sense of, and clarity of, we actually want to use money as a lubricant for what wants to happen and what's already happening through us, rather than being dependent on it to get things started. So then there's all this energy of almost like, well, what's already going on in what we're doing, but also in the communities we're a part of, and how might whatever the village is support the thrival of all of that. And it feels really exciting because hearing you reflect, Carol, I'm thinking about like, well, there's something at the core that is unique to all of us, which is why we're here doing this village thing, which has to do with like seeing so many resources in the people in the community around us, and knowing that if the entire ecosystems we're a part of could all see each other, then things would flow in a way where the whole thing would lift itself up. And so there's a lot of energy for us in like, how do we actually link up those senses of like, I have this card, or I have this idea that I could do, I have this resource of experience, but I don't have money to do it. And someone else goes, I have money, I really need that experience. But not just between two people, on the scale of an entire network. And it really feels alive to me, and I think alive to all of us, different ways that we could experiment with creating more flows between the communities and networks we're a part of.
Great. Do we feel complete in terms of reflection of what has happened so far?
My mind comes back to pace and progress and doing and being, and feeling a twinge earlier this morning of like kind of the have we done enough? What have we done? What can we prove? What can we show? But thinking to the time that we've spent together, and so much about the process and the self-awareness of the process. There's something, I mean, it's hard. There's something hard to express. It seems pretty illegible to try to point at the nature of the relationships that we have, n squared wired across all of us here, and how those have shifted and deepened and grown over the past several sessions. But there's something I don't know. There's something really valuable in it, and it's something that is so rare. Like I've now that I'm here and I've got this, like it's so like I I don't want to give this up, or it's just it's so evident the impact that it makes to my psyche, and um yeah, to be in this network and this web that we're already in. We already knew each other, but the impact that this container specifically has made between me and any one of you is, I don't know. I just want to point to that and say like, hey, that's big. That's something that's really valuable, and um, the degree to which we are trying to be so self-aware about all of this of what is it that we're doing, puts me in a questioning mode of like, all right, well, where's the magic? Where's the secret sauce? Where's the value? That can be legible. But yeah, that was tickling me. Wanted to get that out.
I'm thinking of the word trust, which I don't know has come into this conversation yet, but um, I just energetically, I feel like we're going really fast. Um, yeah, like big moves are happening tomorrow. There's a lot of things that I think I sense are fairly imminent on the horizon. Um, and I think that's part of like me feeling like things are moving fast. But if things aren't moving fast everywhere, then there's flowing that can happen. That means that things can actually smooth out and that other parts can pick up activity. And maybe I can offload activity in certain ways. And the nature of how things are flowing affects how things are moving energetically in different parts of the network right now. Yeah, but there's something about trust and how things are feeling faster in this part because we've put in this time and gone deep with each other and built that trust. And so things amongst us are flowing. And so there's like, I sense that there's a lot of energy already being transferred between the people within this village. And that's where part of the asymmetry that I'm feeling of how things seem to be moving slower in different parts of the network is because the number of connections and the amount of the bandwidth of trust between the different connections and what I sense to be more periphery, at least based on where I sit in the network, isn't yet like that. And so there's something that I'm not able to put words to right now that has to relate to the role of money, the role of trust, and how it affects the flows of energy and takes advantage of asymmetry of energy within our network.
Yeah, just hearing that, I'm thinking about lead measures and lag measures where there is an output of like funds being able to flow and also other resources being able to flow across the entire network. And we're seeing that one input that actually strongly lubricates that is building trust and being able to deeply share things with one another. And there's a kind of inquiry now into like, what is that magic sauce? What is the thing that has enabled us to feel the sense of trust and connection with each other that we know could also energize around the edges of the network?
And I think the $4,500 that we are co-stewarding together, like I don't know, I feel a sense of shared responsibility from us around this pool of resource or pool of potential energy, if you will. Like if we think of money as literally like energy that could flow in different places, like there is a trust that's built from us caring for this together and talking about it and talking about the possibilities that could come from it.
Yeah, so shall we um do we think that's enough learning that we want to share for now? Or do we want to also have a conversation around potential experiments for this this pot of money, for example? Because in some ways we kept, we noticed there's like the deep, the soil that we need to cultivate, and then there's also action items that, like the very obvious one is how do we use this $4,500, and how can it be used as lubricant or catalyst to kind of like put some actions in the world, for example. And we, in some ways we followed a very organic way of just sensing into when do we want to put more energy in the doing side, when do we want to put more energy in the being side, and cultivating the relationship side, seeing the bigger picture side. Like, so far it has been a very organic process. So how do we feel right now?
I feel definitely open to talking more on this recording, and also imagining the next learning update that we have will have much more detail in it of what we actually did. And yeah, I think just what's alive to me today and from the last call that happened is an idea around using the funds as lubricant. And there's something about if we did have many different directions and projects at different parts of each of our overlapping networks that we feed funds into to help support, then we get many different case studies and lots of different information from different people that also, even through them sharing and reflecting, whoever's involved, on what it was, that creates more connections through the network as well, of everyone learning about the experiments that we run, with funds being a part of it. So I feel currently a sense of inspiration and energy towards the possibility of many different experimental places that funds go to flow, so that we can learn back from different people at different parts of the network.
Maybe we want to pause this recording, and then we can start and do a part 2 that could be sent as an appendix, which would be the furthering of our conversation of, let's look at all these possibilities right now and see what we want to do.
Yes, feels good for reporting and updating what has transpired, and and then we can be excited about, and what's coming next.
That feels good.
Great. I will stop recording.